Hello, this is Margaret Ajibola, the STEM Positive Disruptor, and today I have a special guest, Dr. Susie Alegre. She's an international lawyer, author, and speaker. She's an expert on AI, neurotechnology, and emerging technologies, and she's looking at things through the lens of humans, where she's addressing the key ethical issues, questions of AI of our day to day. Her career has been marked by engagement with critical legal and political issues, including human rights and security, combating corruption, border rights, climate change impact, privacy, cybersecurity, and disinformation, and neurotech. I can talk more about, but she can tell us more about that. But the reason why we set up this platform, we want to educate, we want to raise awareness, we want to change people's perception. We want to demystify what STEM is, that's science, technology, engineering, mathematics. And, with Susie, gosh, she's amazing. Her first book was called Freedom to Think, and it was the Financial Times Technology of the Year book. And her latest book is called Human Rights, Robot Wrong, Being Human in the Age of AI. It's to be published, but she can tell us when that's going to be published. But it's, I've started reading it, and it's very thought-provoking, and it's getting you to think about things, not just about all the benefits of AI. AI itself, we know there's so many benefits of it, and we're enjoying it today, and we're in the future it's going to be used. But it's also about looking at the flip side, looking at it from a human perspective. What are things that we need to do? Is it going to hinder us long time? Because again, there are issues that are coming up about our own privacy, about how societies look at ethical concern for society, surveillance, biasity, discrimination, role of humans, of human judgments as well. So these are the things that she's addressing in her latest book. So without further ado, welcome, Susie.
Thanks so much, Margaret. Thank you so much for having me on. And here, it's not going to work because the AI is going to blur it out.
Yeah.
It is the book, the right way up.
Yeah.
And yeah, no, thank you so much for the introduction. And the book is out this week on the 2nd of May, on Thursday, in the UK and Commonwealth, and in September in North America. So it's a real pleasure to be here with you.
Well, thank you. I'm so intrigued because, again, when you wrote your first book about freedom to think, again, you talk about these sort of things, but this human right, this new latest book is so important. It's getting us to look at things not about just the benefits, because I think maybe we are being complacent, maybe we're so comfortable what AI is doing for us, we're not looking and hold on a minute. Are there things that I need to make sure that I am checking to ensure I don't end up in a rut, or I end up with deep fake information or misinformation, because that's happening a lot as well. So tell us why you wrote the book.
Well, I think, as you said in the introduction, I'm an international lawyer by background. So my career has really been about human rights, not so much about AI and STEM. It's been a focus that's sort of gathered over the years, if you like. So as you said, my first book about freedom to think was inspired by the first time I read about the Cambridge Analytica scandal, and this idea that our data could be used to target and manipulate us, including in elections. And that was something that I felt so viscerally about, that it suddenly became clear to me why human rights are so important in our approach to big data and the sort of the way that technology is developing. This second book was really triggered again out of news stories that really brought it home to me how vital it is to look at the way AI is being deployed and developed from a human rights perspective. The first thing, I suppose, was ChatGPT early last year, when it became a thing, if you like. And I, like many other creatives, I'm somebody who's been writing since I was tiny. I've always been writing stories, poems, as well as non-fiction and articles. Writing is just a part of who I am. And a lot of the narrative around ChatGPT was that it was effectively going to replace the need for human writers, and that everyone can write their own novel because they can use ChatGPT and a couple of prompts. And as a writer, that felt like a really existential threat, not from an economic perspective, because frankly, writing does not pay many people's bills.
No.
And the average income of writers in the UK has gone down over the past 5 years from around £10,500 a year to around £7,000 a year. The last time it was viewed. So it's already an entirely precarious industry. It's not about pushing back in economic interests. It was much more visceral, much more what it means to be creative. And I think a lot of creatives, whether photographers, filmmakers, writers, musicians, felt that same threat. And I think that the feeling that the people who are creating and selling AI don't really get what it is to be creative or what human creativity is. And so what I wanted to do was to write about it, because I'm a writer, to try to get across this message of why it should matter to all of us, this idea of human creativity. And the more I looked into it, the more stories popped up affecting different human rights. So again, as a lawyer, I started seeing stories about ChatGPT being used by lawyers in court, generally with not great effect, either for their clients or for the lawyers themselves. And then I started reading as well stories about particularly a man early last year in Belgium who took his own life after a 6-week intensive relationship with a chatbot. And certainly the exchanges that he had with that chatbot seemed to indicate that he felt that the future would only be safe in the hands of AI, because he was suffering from really acute climate anxiety. He left behind a widow and 2 children, and certainly his widow felt that if it hadn't been for that relationship with an AI chatbot, that he would still be with them today. And I think seeing these kind of really quite acute and deeply disturbing examples popping up in the media made me realize that there was a real need to actually pause and to try to talk about, well, what are the human rights implications of AI today? Not some future artificial general intelligence, but AI today, and how can we help people working in STEM, people developing the future of science and technology, to understand the key things they need to be thinking about what it means for all of us to be human in that future.
And it's so true. And I think in a way, this is so, so important. Sometimes, with human beings, again, sometimes we become lazy because AI is basically an imitator. It mimics what you do. You tell it what to do. The creators, the developers, and the promoters and the users, because they have an end goal to that. And in your book, there's quite a lot of examples going to the initial Alan Turing, and moving forward, even with the post office scandal, of how how we're using technology to cause more problems. That it has its benefits. Please, we're not saying it doesn't, but we were saying that, hold on, we need to look at things. Maybe those who are behind the scenes, yes, you do have this, but there are issues that we need to address. And this is what you're basically saying. Look, let's look at it from a human perspective, because of the issues of, like, you talk about your creativity being diminished or not being taken seriously, because now it's an AI can do this, so we don't need that human person to do it.
Absolutely. And I think there are big questions that, they're questions, they're political questions, economical questions, but they're also very human questions. And I think you raised the post office Horizon scandal, which I wrote about, talking about the impact of technology and AI on justice. And, that has now been recognized as really one of the most egregious and far-reaching miscarriages of justice in British legal history. And, a part of the problem was the Horizon technology. But a bigger part, the reason why it became such a huge problem, was several factors which are very human. One of them being the problem of automation bias, that people want to believe the computer. If the computer gives you an answer, it's very difficult to think otherwise. And, there've been stories in the past decade or so of people literally driving their car off a cliff because they're believing Google Maps. If Google Maps tells them to go this way, they won't believe their own eyes. And the Post Office Horizon scandal was a bit like that you're seeing people being prosecuted for crimes that never happened. It's not that somebody else did them, it's that there was no fraud, there was no missing money in the sub postmasters' tills. And one of the real challenges about it has been how hard it has been for the sub postmasters to get justice. And that's, that's an ongoing issue. And it's not the technology that solves the problem. It's people, it's justice systems, it's access to justice. And it's recognizing that we need a right to fair trial in order to address injustices in our system, whether those are driven by technology or by people. And part, as I say, of that, the wider problem with the Post Office scandal is the way the people responded to the problems with the technology and the way the systems responded, including the justice system, to the problems in the technology.
And that's so right. And I think that's the problem again. It took a lot of time. It took one person, this guy, who just said, no, I'm going to fight this. And if he didn't stand up, if he didn't fight against the system, they will still be in that dilemma. There will still be a miscarriage of justice. And that's something that this is one of so many miscarriage of justice, because of the system is saying one thing, but it actually contradicts what's really the reality. And unless somebody stands up, and we are responsible, everybody is responsible, not just the creators, but everybody has to be very much aware we our own judgment. Technology is only as good as the people that what input you put into that technology. It doesn't matter if it's machine learning or whatever tools you're using. And you made a point in your book here, as part of the introduction, says AI and emerging technologies are often new tools that could be used for human flourishing or for human devastation. But the rights we need as humans to address these challenges are already there. We just need to remember how to use them. Please expand on that.
So the human rights framework that we have today in the UK stems, it's got a long history if you want to go back to Magna Carta, but most of if you wanted to rely on the rights in Magna Carta today, many of us would not do very well out of that. So the human rights that we enjoy today come from essentially the Universal Declaration on Human Rights in 1948, which was a sort of coming together after the Second World War by people from all around the world within the United Nations to recognize the basic rights and freedoms that all people need to effectively enjoy their humanity with dignity. And that was a declaration, but it then led to a series of international laws, including at the UN level, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, and the International Covenant on Economic, Social and Cultural Rights. So bringing together things like the right to health, the right to education, with things like the right to a fair trial, the right to life, the prohibitions on torture and slavery, for example. So it was a real kind of collection of what we need to enjoy our humanity with dignity. And in Europe, that was then translated into the European Convention on Human Rights. And really at the very end of the last century, in the UK, that was translated into UK law in the Human Rights Act. And so the Human Rights Act in the UK brings the civil and political rights that are in the European Convention on Human Rights directly into UK law, so that the courts can look at cases before them through the prism of human rights law. So it's no longer just an idea, it's no longer a philosophical nicety, it's very much the letter of the law. And so what I'm saying is that actually we'll often hear that tech is outpacing the law. In many cases, that's not entirely true. Tech may be outpacing the enforcement of the law, but often you'll see that if you look at what's happening to people in the context of technology, that the solutions can be found in human rights law and in human rights interpretations of applicable law to protect, whether it's privacy, whether it's the right to freedom of thought, the right to education, the right to a fair trial, that we have these rights in law but we need to remember to use them, and we need to be very careful not to be lured into this false sense of either security or insecurity, depending on your perspective, that technology is in some way above or outside the law. Because technology, when it affects human beings, affects human rights, and those human rights are protected in the law.
Indeed, I agree with you 100%. You know, you see, that's the whole thing. It's a small percentage that is in control of this development, or they're investing in it to make things happen. Sometimes they feel they're above the law, and sometimes they're able to get away with it. I was going to talk about Trump just now, but maybe not go to Trump.
Not today.
Not today.
For another day.
But okay, no, but that's there are other people as well. But you know, and people are investing in technology. I mean, and they're doing good. So Elon Musk, for example, with the SpaceX and everything else. But you know, you also mentioned there was you said it's the duty of the government to protect and promote our human rights, no matter where the threat comes from. What should it just be the government's duty?
It's not only the government. So the way human rights law is framed means that it puts obligations on governments to do that, to respect our rights. So not to do anything to destroy our rights. So we see that sort of in policing. The police have to act in a way that is not destroying people's rights, but also to protect our rights. So that means that they have to put in place laws that protect us from each other or from companies. So you can see that. I mean, one of the classic examples is laws that protect women against rape in particular, or people against rape. That is a way that the government establishes laws to protect our dignity and to protect us from inhuman, degrading treatment by other people. So that's one of the ways that governments protect our human rights. And then there's also this question of promoting our human rights, of making sure that we understand what our human rights are, and making sure that they are respected more broadly. On the business side, where you will find sort of human rights compliance questions, is in the United Nations level. There are guiding principles on business and human rights, which talk about businesses' obligations to respect our human rights. But when you look at it from a sort of strictly legal perspective, one of the reasons, if you like, from a compliance perspective, that businesses need to think about protecting our rights is that the laws that govern businesses are ultimately interpreted through the Human Rights Act. And so the impacts potentially of what businesses are doing may be considered from a human rights perspective. And aside from that, I mean, just from a purely moral and ethical perspective, most people don't want to go down in history as somebody who was hell-bent on destroying other people's human rights. So there's a sort of, there's a personal moral perspective, but there are also these legal frameworks that are there to make sure that human rights are real. And I mean, we'll see it on a really basic level when you think about, GDPR and data protection rights, which are obviously really important in the tech space where data is being. Well, data protection is not separate from human rights. It is a subset, if you like. The protection of personal data protects our privacy, and then from there protects other rights potentially. So when you're thinking about data protection compliance, it's important to think of it in that broader context of human rights compliance from, as I say, both a kind of personal ethical perspective and business ethics perspective, but also from a compliance perspective.
So true. I totally agree with that. But we deal with humans as well. Humans like to break the law if they can get away with it, and they do until they get caught. And then they'll try to
that's why we need laws enforced by governments to keep them on track.
Indeed. And and I think I can see the point about that the government needs to make sure they respect and protect and promote that from the human rights perspective. So, as an expert of AI, and one of the things that people are talking about, or that quite a lot of number of things that people are talking about, is that we need a diversity of people working on developing or creating the system, put the system in place. What's your perspective? Because sometimes businesses make use of what they have available. That means the resources. They don't always go out of their way to do the right thing. Not that because maybe because of cost, maybe because whatever the reasons are. And so they're always limited by what they can get. And when you think about it, when people do set up a system, what they're doing is also to do research. Research normally takes place on the internet. As you know, you talked about quite a few examples of how people are going onto internet for solution to their problems, but it's so mixed with misinformation or deep information not really real. And so you start believing what's not really real, but you're so desperate, you end up buying into that idea. It's also about playing with your mind in so many ways. So what do you think that we need to start thinking about? Because we have a duty, we have if we want to be ethical and be conscious about what we're doing, that what we put in place is impacting not just you. Of course, you make your profit, but it's actually going to be long term. There are going to be issues that may raise its ugly head. What do you advise them to do?
Well, I would say take advice, frankly, take advice from a diverse range of people and be prepared that to get that advice, you are going to have to pay for it in the same way that you pay for technology, in the same way that, your time is paid for. You need to pay to get the diversity of voices, both from that diverse ethical perspective to understand what your technology might do to other people, to understand where the risks might come from. And I think one of the really crucial thing is don't be afraid of criticism, and it's really important to have critical friends, people who don't necessarily agree with you, to test what you're doing, to think about what's the worst that could happen. And I mean, one of the examples that I have talked about frequently in relation to, weaponized disinformation was the situation in Myanmar, which resulted in a genocide of the Rohingya people. And, a UN inquiry found that Facebook had had an enormous role in pushing hate speech in Myanmar, because effectively Facebook was the only real source of information for people, and it was weaponized by people who were pushing hate with real world devastating consequences. And so, when you think about what's the worst that could happen, it's fairly sure that when Mark Zuckerberg thought up Facebook, he was not thinking about what could possibly go wrong in Myanmar, in the context of a genocide.
Of course.
If he had had a more diverse range of advisors early on, it's possible that, the way algorithms could be used to drive hate, or, the possible downsides or negative consequences of design choices might have been flagged earlier on. So I think it's really vital when you're thinking about what's the worst that could happen. It could be really, really, really bad. So it's worth having somebody tell you what you need to be thinking about early on. And it's quite hard, coming from a legal perspective, particularly from a human rights perspective, talking about these kind of issues, because you'll often, and I'm sure you've attended tech conferences where everything is hugely positive and vibrant and optimistic about the future. And then you get a lawyer coming in and saying, well, have you thought about genocide? It doesn't make people feel positive about what they're doing.
Of course.
But what it is, I think, is not about raining on the parade of technology. It's about helping plan the parade so that the parade goes forward in a way that is joyful and, positive and, human, I suppose, as opposed to the parade turning into a riot. That's essentially why you need to be thinking early on, what are the problems? What could they be? And not just for people like you. It's about thinking, what could the problems be for somebody on the other side of the world? What are the unintended consequences that you haven't thought about? And if you do think about these things early on, it doesn't mean that you have to stop innovating or that you have to stop developing your product, but it does mean that you can mitigate risks in both the way you design and develop, but also in the way you sell your product and what it, what you're thinking of it for.
Indeed.
And I think that is what's vital, is being prepared to think about the worst possible scenarios and decide what you can do to stop those being the scenarios that will come out of your innovation and your ideas and your creativity. Because that is not necessarily the consequence of technology and developments in technology. There are, as you said earlier, huge positive benefits that technology can bring us, ways that it could bring us together, help us to solve really critical challenges for humanity. But to do that, we do need to be able to look at it from 360 degrees and understand what the downsides might be.
So true. I totally agree with you, because even you mentioned in your book again, so technology can support freedom and equality, but it also has a dark side to it. And I think it's, in a way, it's about that. But also, sometimes we think that it's over just because it's now out there. Just to talk about Facebook as an example, but they can still do something. I think in a way, we're not stopped. We can bring change to it. And we are using technology. Technology is taking over. Well, it's not taking over, but if we're not careful, if we're complacent, the danger is we end up seeing things that we don't want to see. And so you talk about drones as well in your book, and how in the war zone era, how people, one day you don't need someone else to manipulate from the back. It can make those decisions itself because you're created to do that. There are lots of, again, it's looking at the pros and the cons of everything that we're doing, and just looking at, as you're saying, being human in the age of AI is also being aware that we need to make sure whatever we put in place is for the greater good of society as a whole. But society also has to play a role to make sure that, yes, I'm enjoying the benefits of it, but there are things I need to be aware of and the things I need to do to ensure that whatever I do with it, whether good or bad, there's going to be precautions, and we need to make sure that's something we are very careful about and address those in itself.
Yeah.
Yeah, go on.
No, I absolutely agree. And I think one of the things that it's important as well to think about is that, AI is not going to solve all our problems. We need human solutions as well. And so being prepared to say, I've created this great new tool, but it should only be used for these purposes. Being prepared to make decisions, both as to how you sell products, but also as to how you use products in your daily life. And, stopping to think, okay, I could use this, but should I use it? What will the consequences be? Will it actually be a net benefit? And one of the challenges in all of the discourse around AI in particular, and particularly in the last year when it's really intensified, is that you're constantly being asked to pick a side. Like, are you for AI or against AI? Are you a tech optimist or are you a skeptic? Why do we have to be on one side or another? These are really complex questions. And it's about bringing people together with different perspectives to find the pathways through that have, the maximum benefit and do the minimum harm to other people as well as to ourselves.
Indeed, I totally agree. So, we need people to sort of, I don't know if you can see it. Can you see it?
No. I can see, yeah, the AI is doing better on yours. Yes, I can see yours.
But we're taking a copy of the wrong page. But what would you like? Because I think people should read it, because it's thought-provoking. And, you give very good, so many examples. So again, you're not looking at it from one perspective, you're looking at different from all over the world as well. You're looking at it from a war zone area to just in the back, in a very little corner, and how people and young people especially are really getting into it as well. So very briefly, what would you, again, just promote it? Human rights. Can you see?
Yeah. Yes, I can see. Just about, yeah.
Okay.
Yours is shiny, mine's blurry, but you know, we're getting there. That's the
Okay,
wonders
so
of technology.
indeed, indeed.
I think why I hope people will read it is to remember the importance of our humanity and to really have that as the core to everything you do, whether you are working in technology or with technology or just living with technology as we all are, to really have that sort of all around view on what it means to be human, how AI and technology might affect that, and what it is we want out of our future relationship with technology. And that might be different for different people. It might be different in different countries, but ensuring that whatever decisions we make, we're not trampling all over the rights of somebody else. And whether that's, you know, somebody in our own families or somebody on the other side of the world, I think being aware of the consequences and planning our technological future accordingly is what I hope. And I hope that this brings at least a broader understanding of what human rights law means and how it can help us to make those complex and difficult decisions.
Indeed. Well, thank you so much, Susie. I really appreciate your time to have a conversation about this. It's called Human Rights, Robot Wrongs, Being Human in the Age of AI. It's going to be published on the 2nd of May in UK and Europe, but in September 2024 across the world. Or is it just USA? Yep. Okay. So again, I'm really excited. So please listen to this because again, it raises awareness. It educates you to think from a human perspective about technology. Technology is a tool. It's not the end all. And this is something that you want. Susie is saying, look, let's think in a different way. Let's look at it from a human perspective. That whatever we put in place, is it going to impact whoever positively or negatively, and what should we be doing to combat that? She gives so many good examples as well from across a globe, which I think would be very useful for people to see, to read her book and understand why she felt there was a need to do something like this, or to write this book again. So again, thank you so much, Susie. Really
My pleasure.
appreciate
Thank you for having me.
No problem. Again, this is Margaret Ajibade, the STEM Positive Disruptor. And, you know, our plan here is to educate, raise awareness, change people's perception, and demystify what STEM is: science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. To bring the public into our domain is to start a conversation either with the government, with the education system, with the industry, to get change, to make us to be aware and be more conscious of how we do things. What we put in place is not just impacting us now, but it's a long-term impact as well. Just make sure whatever you put in place is beneficial for everybody as well. So thank you very much. Appreciate it. Thank you.
My pleasure.